So let's discuss the journal article that you have called Unlocking the Value of Your CRM Initiative. It's by Peppers and Rogers, and you have a PDF of it in the week 3 files to go ahead and read. In about the year 2000 or so, I was in Phoenix, Arizona at an American Marketing Association National Educators Conference, and I put on a talk with the title CRM is Dead, Long Live CRM. It was a point in time when the information about CRM initiatives and CRM installations and their successfulness had just come out. And it had been reported that somewhere between 60 to 80% of CRM projects were failing. Companies that weren't managing their databases as a dynamic asset were simply not able to take the investment that they had put into a CRM turnkey operation and turn it into profits for the organization. But at the same time, I noted in the speech that while CRM was getting a bad name, the principles of CRM were going to be around forever. And so it was an interesting talk. There were yaysayers and naysayers there, but it was really all about CRM. And while the concept of CRM was struggling, and the term CRM was getting a bad reputation, the idea of building relationships with your best customers certainly still had the same level of appeal. So it's important to understand that implementing a CRM strategy is much more than a technology initiative. Companies that view buying CRM technology as implementing CRM will probably fail to realize the significant ROI gains from an effective CRM program. And of course, this comes from Peppers and Rogers, the CRM initiative paper that you, if you have not read, you should read before you go any further in this video. One of the things that they talk about in the paper is the synchronized development of a CRM initiative. All right, and it's this idea that that a business, that a CRM strategy has goals and objectives, and to reach those, it is important to develop process flows to achieve the selected strategy. It's crucial to understand that there is going to require some process engineering to both implement and turn those new processes into routinized activities. The goal in all of this is to create user engagement, that is, getting targeted users to successfully utilize the applications and to get users to actually interact with the tools that we have put in place to foster relationships. One of the things that Peppers and Rogers talk about is the idea that the customer database is a business asset. So CRM actually requires a change in mindset, in that the customer base is in fact the most important asset of the company. You've all heard of brand equity, where we talk about how valuable a brand is and how we try to somehow financially determine the value of a brand. Well, when you think about brand equity, if your company is customer-centric and has a database in place, we also need to be thinking about customer equity. That is, how valuable is your customer base? So implementing CRM technologies is often incorrectly equated to implementing CRM. And in actuality, CRM is a business strategy that is enabled by technology, and the technology is not the strategy, it's not the implementation of the strategy. It is simply a tool to enable that strategy to be implemented. And of course, Peppers and Rogers argue that CRM is simply the ability to treat different customers differently. So Peppers and Rogers have developed an IDIC methodology that has an analysis and an action component to it. And the analysis component is the ID, that is, identifying customers individually and addressably. That is, identifying the individual customers that you have in your database. And of course, to be able to do that accurately, you need to have individual level purchase data. Without individual level purchase data, it is virtually impossible to implement a database-driven CRM strategy. The second part is to not only identify who your customers are individually, but differentiate those customers based on their needs, values, and potentially their actions. That is, determine how those customers are different from each other and how each one of those customers needs to be communicated with and marketed to get the most out of that customer group in terms of profitability. The next two parts are, of course, the IC, and these IC are action components. The first one is to interact with customers in a way that benefits them and the company. This goes back to the whole concept of building relationships that are mutually beneficial to both the company and the individual customer. And then, of course, customize that relationship over time based on the company's understanding of the customer's needs, values, and activities. They then talk about the CRM foundational elements required for success. And they start off with something very global, and then they work down to things that are maybe a little bit more specific. They start off with this idea of a CRM vision and strategy. That is, we are going to collect individual level data on individuals. How is that information going to be used in a way that changes how we communicate and market to individual customers? That is really the clear question here. The second foundational element is customer information. Companies must be able to analyze their customer base to differentiate those customers. To do that, of course, what do you need to have? That's right, individual level purchase data. All right, we need to have customer-focused process design. That is, designing processes from the customer's point of view to enhance the customer experience. That is, of course, looking at the business from the customer's point of view. The fourth element in the foundational elements is adoption. That is, key aspects of change management must be addressed to ensure the adoption, including a customer-focused organizational design, training incentives, and metrics. The key into having a CRM system work is to have empowered and motivated employees to actually implement that strategy. And then there has to be a culture of trust. Trust is the belief that the company has the best interests of the customer at heart and is dependent upon the respect, openness, and tolerance and honesty. While that's a tall order, it certainly is a goal and aspiration for all businesses, but especially for those who are going to be making a significant change to their business operations. All right, so CRM vision and strategy. Leadership must hold and communicate the vision of CRM. Build a competitive advantage and generate significant ROI for the company. CRM is not only a technology, but instead it is all about developing long-term profitable customer relationships. You can make the argument in the famous words of the universal traveler, CRM is a journey and not a destination. Companies will never be able to declare that they have perfected their customer relationships, but they do have to realize that a customer-focused CRM is a fundamental ongoing aspect of the overall company vision. That is, it's important to develop the mentality of continuous improvement. Once again, it goes back to viewing the customer base as an asset. It's important that the CRM requires a company that the company develop a strategic initiative to grow the value of the customer database. And in the lectures talking about lifetime value of customers, we're going to show you how to develop the metrics to see if that's actually working. And then, of course, we need to customize or improve some aspects of our products or services to create value, satisfaction, and loyalty for the customers, and understand how customers differ from each other in terms of what it is they're looking for in a product and how they can build a relationship with the company. Here I have a little chart showing the idea of a CRM business transformation. That is the idea of the customer-facing strategies and how that ties back into individual goals. So, customer selection and how customer selection is supposed to result in more profits. So there's some customer-facing strategies that are important. That is to decide which customers we're going to pursue, how we're going to try to acquire those customers that we want to have as customers, how are we going to retain them, and then how is that all going to fit into customer growth. Some of the processes are the same processes that non-database companies use, like market segmentation, campaign planning, brand and account planning, all the sorts of things that all businesses use. The second part is, of course, customer information, data-driven decision making. This is the notion that database marketers are data-driven. One of the things that I always try to impart on all the students in all of my classes is the importance of data-driven decision making rather than sort of playing hunches and arguing that I'm an intuitive decision maker. All right. And of course, the steps are pretty simple in terms of being able to write them down. That's a little bit more difficult, I think, to actually implement. But the point is that we're going to collect data on individuals. We need to turn that data into information by being able to put it into a database in an organized manner. We then need to analyze that information so that we can turn that information into knowledge. That is, it's not enough to have means, medians, and modes. We have to identify what that information is telling us in terms of knowledge about our customers and knowledge about the activities that are going to be necessary moving forward. And of course, that knowledge should then turn into insights and strategies. Okay, and it goes back, of course, to the identifying and differentiating part of that. There's a couple of key notions in this idea, and that is part of the first one is the Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle, where 80% of your business, especially your profits, probably come from 20% of your customers. We need to identify how valuable each individual customer is and what kind of potential value they have. And of course, it is crucial to understand that analytics enables CRM. Analytics is the lifeblood of successful relationship marketing because relationship marketing should always be data-driven. And of course, here I have a managed analytics overview. Gather data, derive customer insight, suggest proactive actions, and then evaluate the responses. Of course, there's a lot of room between gathering customer data and turning it into customer insight. And that's where the processes and the CRM technology comes into play. Third, a customer-focused process design. Okay, these are the last two stages of Peppers & Rogers IDC methodology. Developing and revamping key business processes using holistic customer-centric approach. One of the problems that you have to be careful with is that increases in efficiency can worsen customer relationships. An example of this could be things like call center metrics. Most call centers have a variety of metrics, but one of the metrics they use is once and done, and the other things that they use is how long it takes to get a customer off the call, things like that. And we have to be careful that we don't put metrics in place that are counter to what the goals and objectives of the organization are over time. You need to have both short-term and long-term metrics in place. Companies need to value their customers and know what their needs are, preferences, regardless of what channel they're being communicated in. Now, the critical aspect of this is the idea of getting close to your customers. One of my favorite lines is always, if you know your customers, you know your business. And you'll be surprised at how many companies don't know their customers or don't care. Think about UNLV and the central administration working at UNLV. How much do you think the central administration knows about the student population and the student base? Now, let me ask you that again. How much do you think the central administration knows about the customer base? You know, for instance, most of our students are commuter students. How much do you think our central administration knows about those commuter students? When I first arrived at UNLV, we had a president by the name of Bob Maxim. And Bob Maxim used to go to lunch every single day at the student union by himself. And he would go over about 12:30, and by about 1:30 in the afternoon, there would be 50 students sitting around Bob chatting with him. And that was Bob's way of gathering information about the student population and in terms of what was important to the student population and what things the student population, what things that the university could do to make life easier and more tolerable for our student base. And it was sort of interesting because Bob, listening to those students, Bob realized that the students hated to pay for parking. And so he made an edict then that as long as he was president of the university, there would be no fee for student parking. The other thing that students were very interested in was flexibility in their schedules. Students hated late afternoon classes. So every day we had a schedule set up so we would have a siesta every day. We went to school then 5 days a week instead of the 4 days a week we go now. But in general, most of the classes stopped at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then started up again at 5:30. And the idea was that we had a day student population and a night student population, and that we needed a little break in between because none of the students could actually take courses in that period in between. And so Bob was able to figure out and get close to the customers by actually sitting down and talking to them. Online businesses obviously don't have the ability, so they've got to figure out how to get close to customers in a different way. So other things that are, of course, come in the thing here is how we're going to provide service and how we're going to respond to inquiries. If you've ever tried to communicate with someone like Facebook, good luck, because you really can't communicate with them. That's not really what they're set up for. Now, a couple of quick things in here. Integrated marketing communications with customers is expected. What does that mean? It means that the customers expect that all channels and all communications with them are consistent. And of course, the second part of this then is to engage customers to build brand equity. What does it mean to engage customers? It means to actually get customers involved with the good or service with the organization. Fourth, adoption. All right, so the idea of this is how do we adopt a new business system? Changing from a non-database driven organization and a non-CRM based organization to one that is. Well, of course, a couple of key notions in here. One is don't make this too complicated. Don't create more work. Try to eliminate some work. You have to be focused on customer-focused organizational design. At the end of the day, the whole process should be easier for customers, not more complicated. You need to manage customer equity and you need to manage brand equity, and you're probably going to have to change how the organization is evaluated in terms of what does it mean to be successful? And then to do that, then you're going to have to change then how people are rewarded. Most organizations have no way to reward the employees that are helping to retain customers. That obviously has to change in a CRM environment. And of course, here we have a little chart here about the change management approach. And so there's this idea of the steps necessary to create a change architecture, to create an environment for change within the organization, developing a coalition to change champions, communicate, engaging the audience, capturing short-term wins, and of course identifying and deploying long-term system changes. In summary, the key concept in maximizing the implementation of a CRM initiative is identifying and implementing the right database marketing strategies. It's not enough to build a database. It's not enough to install a CRM system. You need to figure out how to make it a profitable business strategy.